The following is a Spirit Street production. You've discovered your link to the PowerCat Podcast. It's the PowerCat Podcast.
Hello from Frisco, Texas. Not Manhattan, Kansas. Not the Go PowerCat headquarters. Nothing like that. We are in Frisco, Texas, at a hotel here, not far from the Toyota Stadium here, where North Dakota State and Eastern Washington are going to go head-to-head in the FCS National Championship game. I'm Riley Gates. Zach Carlson is here. Also is D. Scott Fritchen here to bring you guys coverage of North Dakota State, Chris Kleiman, and all of the assistant coaches he's bringing to Manhattan with him. And we are joined here by our new colleague, Ross Uglum here. He is a North Dakota State beat reporter, I guess. What is your official title here for the site here on the 24/7 Sports Network?
Sure, so I'm the editor of the Bison Report. It's a three-man operation. We've got Ryan Burns, who covers the recruiting. He is also the owner and publisher of the University of Minnesota site, which is kind of how we got started. He recognized North Dakota State's market as a viable one for a 24/7 site, something that would be profitable for the company, that would provide a service to the fans. And so he was looking for a writer, and that's where I came in. And we were two. And then this year I actually started an internship program with the university. So I've got one of those. So now we are three.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get into a little bit of North Dakota State here, but first want to thank our sponsors back in Manhattan. Obviously, the Fridge Wholesale Liquor does some great things for us. All the guys over there at Claflin and Westport. Fitz, that is for you. Remember that, because that is the proper street corner. Also, Tanner's Sports Bar and Grill in Aggieville. We've got Wahoo Fire and Ice, and we've also got the High Low. All great sponsors here, the PowerCat Podcast. We like to go to all of them, and obviously we talk about them a lot. So this is not just a line. We actually go there. We actually utilize all the establishments there. So, anyways, let's dive into you just a little bit more here, Ross. A lot of people don't understand who you are, where you got your start before. I guess you just kind of mentioned it there, but just briefly your background, kind of how you got involved in the area, and just kind of some of the other things that you do, because a lot of people have started following you on Twitter now that you're part of our staff, and
probably very confused. Yeah,
yeah. Oh, I think he covers the Packers. Well, I think he covers K-State. What is your little brief background, I guess?
Right, sure. So I intended on walking on to the golf program at North Dakota State, broke my leg, had a previous offer to play at a Division III college right across the river. So played 4 years of golf for Concordia College as a communication mass media major. Quickly found out that, at least coming right out of college, the market that I wanted to stay in, that was not where I was necessarily going to make the most money. So I got into a couple other businesses, but using my degree and always wanting to keep it fresh, I got involved with a couple of Green Bay Packers sites. So that is, where I got started in this business, really focusing a lot on like X's and O's stuff, and also draft prep. People love the NFL draft. They really do. They love it like they love college football recruiting. It's always the promise of the unknown. So got involved in that, and then for 3 years there, had plenty of stuff to kind of build a resume, or stuff that people could read if they were interested in hiring me. So like I said, the University of Minnesota, their 24/7 site, they came to the management at what was then Scout and said, hey, we really think North Dakota State has a big enough fan base and has enough interest in recruiting that if we started a site, it would be profitable. And we need one person on the ground in Fargo, because obviously Ryan wasn't going to leave Minneapolis, so we need one person on the ground in Fargo, and we got kind of connected. I sent him over a couple of articles that I had written, and he was in. So ever since fall camp of Carson Wentz's first year as a starter, which would be 2014, I believe, we've been together. So, of course, developed relationships with the Coach Kleiman staff, and certainly I developed a pretty deep understanding of what they did, from a scheme standpoint and what made that machine go so well. But then when it became kind of a possibility that Klieman might be the guy, that's when I got contacted by 247 saying, hey, we might want you, not in Manhattan, so nobody get that in your head, but we might want you as part of the team at Go PowerCat because now you might be the guy in our network with the deepest understanding of this staff and of this coach, and so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's certainly been beneficial. Just 2 articles already, analyzing some North Dakota State stuff and some schemes that are coming to K-State, and the subscribers here at GoPowerCat.com are already excited. I mean, there's been so much positive reaction so far, and you mentioned the start of your tenure kind of with the North Dakota State program with Coach Klieman, and there isn't many people out there that understand it better than you. Obviously, K-State fans had a lot of mixed reactions when the hiring happened. He's an FCS guy. He can't do it at this level. And then when he kind of got there, when people got to know him a little bit better, they came to appreciate him more. What is it, though, about his success, in your opinion? Because so many people said he just picked up the pieces where Craig Bull left off, and he just kind of inherited something. He didn't necessarily have that type of dominance that Craig Bull had. How has he been able to sustain this and potentially even take it further? Because you could probably make an argument that the program might be in a better place with Chris Klieman than maybe where Craig Bull had it.
Right, and I think that's actually... It's not a might. It is. And specifically, and I think, I think Kansas State fans will like to hear this, what I'm about to say, more than maybe anything else. The number one thing that you can see from the bowl era to the Klieman area is the absolute clear-cut elevation of the recruiting profile at North Dakota State. This class... and actually they lost Jaron Lewis to Kansas State, but this class of NDSU before Jaron Lewis flipped had 5 of the 10 highest rated recruits to ever commit to North Dakota State. Now obviously with 4 of the 10, but the point remains. He continued to push and push and push and get NDSU into living rooms, get NDSU into conversations that they were never in before. You go back and people need to understand too, North Dakota State had 8 national championships before Craig Bull even got there. Granted, they were Division II, and that's, trust me, a steep drop in talent from even the FCS level. But the culture of winning was already there, and Bull kind of revived it because they had not won a national title since 1990 when they won the one in 2011. So don't get me wrong, Craig Bull deserves a ton of credit, but it has been elevated. It has been brought to a higher level by Klieman. They are in more, like I said, more living rooms. They are getting a shot at some 3-star kids that you would just never even consider that for an FCS program to really have a shot at 3-star kids. And what I think, too, is you talk about the airport test. The airport test is whether it's college basketball, college football, whatever. When you see a team walking through the airport and you're like, man, who are those guys? That's a whole different ballpark now with North Dakota State. You used to see, like Joe Mays is a great example, but NFL linebacker for a long time. Joe was 5'11", thumper, great player, but he was 5'11", and that was on, and you saw that when they went and beat Minnesota. They were undersized. They were great players, but they were undersized. Now you've got Nick DeLuca at middle linebacker for the Jacksonville Jaguars, 6'3", 250. I mean, these are big, hulking kids. They're not undersized anymore. They are getting the kids into the program that are athletically impressive. They're not beating Goliath with Davids anymore. They are Goliath. And so that's, I think, what you definitely want to hear if you're a K-State fan is the fact that, yes, North Dakota State was successful with Craig Bull, but they got higher level and higher level and higher level kids involved in the program as Klieman continued his rise. And I think that's something, that you could see with Kansas State. I get it. NDSU doesn't go into Oklahoma, doesn't go into Texas. But they were able to go into Florida for the speed kids. They were able to, expand their recruiting footprint. And it might be a thing, and I've always said this with the climb and hire. It might be a thing where it's a decent idea for Kansas State to zag when everybody else is zigging. Maybe don't go and try and compete with Oklahoma and compete with Texas for those kids. Maybe don't run a 4-wide spread on offense and try and sling it around like those guys do. Maybe play a little ball control offense. Maybe go into Chicago. That's where, Clanderman would be. Or go make sure that you're fighting with the Huskers for the Omaha kids and fighting with the Huskers for the Kansas City kids and making sure that metro is Kansas State territory. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and that's, I think, what had Kansas State fans so nervous was the fact that they didn't feel like that Kleiman was going to be the guy to go into a Texas household and beat the Longhorns, and he's probably not, but it might not matter.
Yeah, I think that, and that was actually going to be my exact next question, was so many people were concerned right away, he can't recruit Texas. He can't recruit Oklahoma. He doesn't do it. You look at the roster. There's nobody from Texas on the roster. And I think I understand that. I understand where K-State fans are coming from. There's, countless notable K-State players that have come from the state of Texas, come from that area. But there's 49 other states out there that you can recruit from. Obviously, there's talented players, and Chris Kleiman's been doing a very good job of getting them in North Dakota State. I mean, is there any concern, do you think, about attacking places like the Omaha, Missouri, and you mentioned, Chicago, and being able to get those, as they call them, Jimmies and Joes that will compete with those guys from Texas?
Right. So, and I think one thing that I kind of went on a little bit of a rant there, but you need to understand is that Kleiman is not going to abandon Texas either. That's not his plan. Yeah. He understands. They brought in Van Malone. Van actually, I think, got his college coaching start in 2003 as the wide receivers coach at North Dakota State. And he brought in some really talented Texans to NDSU. I mentioned that, the speed kids, the skill kids that came from Texas in the bowl era were many. They did a great job from the Houston area, and they got a lot of kids up there that established. People don't understand that the NDSU kind of Division I tradition, and I'm talking about people nationally, maybe with Kansas State, the good times actually started before they were even eligible for the playoffs, which I know sounds dumb, but it's real. In 2006 and 2007, they had 2 10-1 seasons. And one of those 10-1 seasons included beating the University of Minnesota at their place. They also beat Ball State, which is an FBS opponent, just because they weren't eligible for the playoffs. I mean, there were some great, great players on those teams, and that kind of set the foundation for the Brock Jensen crew in 2011 because of guys that had come before them and had incredible success. And they were, even in those 2006, 2007 years, they had weeks where they were ranked number 1 in the country, but everybody knew that they couldn't, be involved in the playoffs. Those teams recruited the heck out of Texas. And so there is a little bit of a history there. But, yeah, I mean, they're going to find a way, as they did at North Dakota State, to get into the areas to get kids where they're getting missed. And I don't mean that as a disrespectful thing towards Kansas State. But until they are, consistently a top 10, top 15 program, they are going to need to get to being a top 10, top 15 program by recruiting kids that other schools are missing on and that don't have as many stars as they maybe should or aren't quite at the level. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
because
right.
They're not going to go into a living room and pull Alabama and Georgia's kid, and convince them to come to Manhattan, at least certainly
Correct.
not right away. So they are going to probably, like I said, they're going to do a little zigging while everybody else is zagging. And when they figure out, their system and frankly, it's not unlike what Bill Snyder did. And that is that Bill, I think, recognized a little market inefficiency in the JUCO ranks and decided that, hey, other programs around here are not paying enough attention to junior colleges. We're going to win because we're getting kids that maybe should be a little higher level, but because they're not high school freshmen, they're not being recognized. And so I'm not saying Kleiman's going to, pick up where he left off, because he was not a JUCO guy at North Dakota State. It was high school senior, high school senior, high school senior. But at the same time, that's something that I definitely would pay attention to, is try and figure out maybe where he thinks he's found a market inefficiency. Maybe it is Florida. Florida has a lot of talent. They have a lot of Division I schools there, but they aren't enough. And I think that's how you see a guy like Bruce Anderson at North Dakota State, who got himself a Senior Bowl invite, who will get himself a Combine invite right out of Ruskin, Florida. He probably should be at UCF, maybe even at a Florida State or at a Miami, but they can only take so many kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Know what I mean?
Yeah. And, one of the things he's going to do in terms of recruiting is obviously utilize his assistants. That's going to be huge. And he's got 9 hired already. We could sit here and talk about all 9 all we wanted, and this podcast would go for maybe 2 hours. Let's focus on the 4 guys that are here with North Dakota State, the first 4 hires. Well, I guess aside from Seiler and Klein, that is. Let's start with Courtney Messingham, obviously, the guy that everybody wanted to know, who's running this offense, who's going to take K-State's offense from 10 in the Big 12 to higher levels, because obviously Andre Coleman was not as efficient as he needed to be this past season for Kansas State. And, Courtney Messingham, all the stats, I don't have them exactly here in front of me, but we know what he can do with an offense at North Dakota State. We've seen him put, countless players up to a higher caliber. What is it about him as a coach? Because he's not this younger, air it out, throw it all over the field that so many people think, oh, you have to do that. You have to throw the ball 5 wide. You have to play an Oregon style of offense in order to succeed in 2018. But he's not doing that. He's succeeding. What is it about him, in your opinion, that makes this hire as an offensive coordinator make so much sense?
Well, there's a number of reasons why it makes sense. And then one of them probably isn't going to excite, Cap fans, but he is a guy that had Big 12 experience. And that's rare from any FCS coordinator, that they would have been an offensive coordinator at a Power 5 level. Those guys generally aren't, even at North Dakota State, So he's got the experience in the Big 12, but at the same time, and then it was going to get a little bit repetitive, but talk about zigging while everybody else is zagging. And Kansas State kind of was already doing that because, they ran 11 personnel a lot, and they were in the shotgun, but it was a lot of inside zone with Alex Barnes, and it was a lot of outside zone, and it was a little bit of read, especially when Delton was in there. But their run-pass ratio looked kind of similar to North Dakota State's, just because they weren't actually lining up in the I formation or lining up in the inverted wishbone like NDSU does, doesn't mean that they weren't already trying to control the ball, play good defense, and slow down these offenses and make them uncomfortable. So what I think you'll see is kind of maybe a change in the way that it looks, but not necessarily a change in the culture or a change in what was trying to be accomplished. Hopefully, obviously, for Kansas State, it's done better. It's done more efficiently. Coach Snyder wasn't fired. That's not what happened. But at the same time, it was a non-bowl season. It was not up to K-State standards. And with this hire of Kleiman, you are trying to get to a higher level. You're trying to kind of right the ship a little bit. And so what Messingham brings is just this evolution of the NDSU offense, the evolution of power, basically, where you pin with the center and you pull a guard and you go down the field. And that's something that I think, you will see a little bit difference in recruiting. Tight ends are going to have to get involved. They're going to have to bring
that'll be new.
Yeah, tight ends are going to have to get involved. But at the same time, they're going to, and they just brought in Jax Deneen. He was a heavily recruited guy by North Dakota State. They wanted him bad. Kleiman goes to K-State, gets him. 2 brothers, I think, that play for KU, which I think is hysterical, but probably the best possible thing for Jax, because this is an offense that didn't really have a place for the fullback before, and he might get a chance to be the fullback for 4 years, so good spot for him. But they're going to do a lot of things differently. One thing that I would definitely pay attention to is they're going to want to get as deep as they can, as quickly as they can, because if you have a chance to watch North Dakota State, and I would sure assume that you're going to do that, being that you're here in Frisco, Texas.
I think I might.
You will see the 5 linemen and the quarterback stay on the field, but almost on every play, the other 5 guys will rotate in and out. They will bring in personnel group after personnel group after personnel group, so that the defense is spending half of the pre-snap just identifying who in the world's on the field. they'll come in 22 and jam it down your throat. The next play, they might be 5 wide, running a quarterback draw, running a tunnel screen, or doing a number of things. And then the very next play on third down, you've got 3 backs. You're in the Delta formation, and you're running a wheel route 65 yards for a touchdown. It's hard. I mean, these guys were in the 40s for points per game in a ball control offense designed to keep the other team off the field. I get it. Kansas State is not next year going to install NDSU's system and win the Big 12. Probably. but my point is that you're not probably going to see 41 points a game, 11 points a game allowed. North Dakota State, for all intents and purposes, is Alabama. They're frankly at a higher level than Alabama with potential for 7 titles in 8 years. They are dynasty mode on EA Sports NFL, or NCAA. And by the way, rest in peace. Rest in peace to that game. But this is a system that has proven it'll work, and now, frankly, it just has a chance at Kansas State to work with maybe some 3- and 4-star level kids, some Big 12 level athletes. But done right, it's something that has proven. Look at their 9-3 record against the FBS. Right. It'll work if they get the right kids in and everybody buys in. It will work. And the wonderful thing is, it'll be kind of that game that everybody looks at and they're like, crap, we have to play Kansas State. Yeah. It's like when the ACC teams are just ripping through their schedule, whichever one's good, Clemson, Florida State, doesn't matter. Dang it, we got Georgia Tech. We got to redo everything that we were doing because now we have to face the triple option. And NDSU doesn't run the triple option. But at the same time, it's like, man, we got to get ready for 2 fullbacks. We got to get ready for, we got to get ready to defend power. And a lot of these clubs, when you look at them, you got 215-pound linebackers, spread linebackers that all of a sudden are going to have Jackson Dean coming smashing them in the face. They don't want that, So it's a fun X's and O's game because nobody in the Big 12 is really personnel-wise prepared for what's coming. And it's unlikely that they ever will because they still have to defend Baylor and Texas Tech and Texas and Oklahoma. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Real briefly before I move on to Connor Riley and all the other guys, got to get to those two. People are really concerned with Courtney Messingham's end at Iowa State.
Sure, makes sense.
Could you real briefly just kind of explain why maybe they shouldn't be as concerned with the fact that didn't end in the best ways?
I mean, I will say this. Tim Polasek left for Iowa, and so Tim Polasek left. You have to understand budgets. Tim Polasek left NDSU offensive coordinator and running backs coach, and it would seem like a demotion to go to be the offensive line coach at Iowa because he loses the coordinator title. Iowa's budget is like 8.5 times what North Dakota State's is, so he was able to get a nice pay raise for himself, and then be honestly, frankly, involved in other discussions. He was involved in the discussion of who would be Kansas State's next offensive coordinator. You can't, unless literally the coach is coming from there, you can't be a Power 5 offensive coordinator if your last job was FCS offensive coordinator, unless a coach is literally bringing you along. And it's a very same situation of, frankly, why Gene Taylor left, North Dakota State. Go to Iowa, be the deputy athletic director. Now you're on the list to have a chance to be the Kansas State athletic director. Ultimately, though, there was concern when Polasek left and they brought in Messingham because he was at Montana State. They weren't that great offensively, but you're only as good as your players, and what you wanted to see was market improvement. Now, granted, I love Polasek, and I think that the natural order of things probably would have been that North Dakota State's offense improved, going from Easton Stick's sophomore year to his junior year, and then going from his junior year to his senior year. This team that Polasek left when Stick was a sophomore, maintained a lot of the same personnel, and they developed and they got better. So it's maybe inaccurate to give all of the credit to Courtney, but there are little wrinkles and stuff that I pointed out in my piece at Go PowerCat that he added, things that he did more efficiently even than Polasek did, and now this is the best offense that they've had in all of the 6 championships before them. Just numbers wise, and frankly, from my eyes, I think this is the best offensive group that they've had. And whether it's the players that were already there before he got there or it's him, it has to be at least a little bit him. So you see it all the time with any head coach that is in trouble. I cover the Packers. Same thing happened. What happened before this year, before McCarthy got let go? Both coordinators got fired. When you're a head coach on a sinking ship, the last effort to keep yourself in your spot is to blame it on the coordinators.
A lot like David Beatty at Kansas.
Right. And so, I mean, when you're sinking and the athletic director is kind of like, hey, what are we doing here? All right, we'll go in a new direction on offense, or we'll go, so that it was the Paul Rhodes thing Courtney Messingham's fault. Probably not. Probably turns out it was the Paul Rhodes thing. So that is something that, doesn't look great on his resume, that you got fired from what, kind of was a lower level Big 12 job. But at the same time, that's what head coaches do when the ship is sinking.
Makes sense, yeah. A position a lot of K-State fans were really concerned with this past season, and makes a lot of sense if you look at the production, is the wide receiver spot. I mean, Isaiah Zuber was a pretty solid constant there from time to time, but obviously he had some inconsistencies too. And when you have a guy like Dalton Schoen, and Dalton Schoen's a very good wide receiver at Kansas State, but he's not exactly a number one Big 12 wide receiver, a number two Big 12 wide receiver. He thrived more in the slot kind of when Byron Pringle was at Kansas State. So wide receiver was not very good for the Wildcats this past season, and Jason Ray is now going to come in and take over that position group. And obviously a position that Andre Coleman, we mentioned him earlier, was very familiar with at Kansas State too. Has Jason Ray done enough in his career, in your mind, at the wide receiver spot to make fans comfortable about this hire?
Well, this is one thing, and I'll always admit when I, am not the expert. Jay Ray's been there for a year.
Right.
Atif Austin was the special teams coordinator and the wide receivers coach for, honestly, I believe when Bowl left and Kleiman hired his staff, which, by the way, that whole thing was insane. The amount of retention, especially at a successful FCS program where you have P5 and G5 trying to poach your assistants, the retention level for Kleiman was truly unbelievable from when he took the job until he left at Kansas State. Most of these guys are the guys from when Bowl left and he needed to quick throw together his staff, because this was before, of course, the early signing period. He needed a staff, and he needed one tomorrow because they needed to finish out that class. So, Ray's been there a year, and the work that was done before him by Atif Austin, who took actually a job with the New England Patriots, that kind of laid the groundwork for most of the young athletes that Jason worked with this season. What I will say is, the other guy on North Dakota State staff that went with Kleiman that had Big 12 experience is Jason Ray. Recruited Tyreek Hill to Oklahoma State. That's something that Fritsch put out there yesterday, but just did a good job. James Washington down there won the Biletnikoff Award, and I think that was obviously after Jason was gone. But he's done this for a while. Played at Mizzou, played the position. That's always a plus. And I think definitely one guy that you'll want to pay attention to tomorrow is Darius Shepard. And one position that you'll want to pay attention to when you get to Kansas State is the slot. They love throwing the football to the slot. Very Patriots-y in that way. Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, you kind of think those type of routes, that kind of success. They played R.J. Urzendowski from Omaha, Creighton Prep. They played him there for a long, long time. Now it's Darius Shepard's turn. They've been constantly, if there's a weakness in NDSU's offense, it's been the constant effort to develop an outside threat at wide receiver, really get, one of those 6'2", feature, Jordy Nelson type wide receivers on the outside. And that's something that they maybe never did accomplish while Kleiman was there. It didn't matter. But if you're looking for something that they struggled to accomplish, it was that true outside threat. Now, a lot of that was won and lost in recruiting. It is very easy for South Dakota State to go to a wide receiver and say, hey, do you want to block 63 times a game? Or would you like us to throw you 100 balls? Now, North Dakota State could go back right to that same kid and say, yeah, do you want to win national titles?
Yeah.
Wide receivers are very selfish. I mean, just in general, that it's a difficult. So it'll be interesting to see, if they can recruit to Kansas State, or does every other team in the Big 12 go, oh, yeah, that'll be fun. Do you enjoy run blocking? How much do you like stock blocking, But there's a fun history of undersized receivers at K-State as well. Curry Sexton, Tyler Lockett, guys that, ultimately you'd think of as slot guys, very Darius Shepard-like in their success at Kansas State. So that would be one thing to watch. But what I will say about Jason Ray is he definitely elevated Shep's game. There's no question about it. Part of that could be the fact that Urzendowski graduated, certainly, but he's on another level this year, and it was unquestionably the number one wide receiver on the team and a true matchup problem for the opposition.
Yeah, I think that Jason Ray was going to do some pretty good things. Obviously Malik Knowles had a kind of a breakout freshman season, if you want to call it breakout, in the time that he saw the field. A guy like Sebastian Taylor is definitely going to benefit, I think, from him come in. And then obviously Hunter Rison is going to excite some people, the transfer from Michigan State. So we'll see how Jason Ray comes in there and utilizes that position group. And obviously on the offense, the one thing that kind of makes it all click, whether you're running the ball, you're passing the ball, is that offensive line. And, Connor Riley, I wrote a feature on him. This has been a hire that from the second it happened, even before it happened, it intrigued me. Looking at stats, looking at guys that have come through North Dakota State, offensive linemen are without a doubt a huge part, I think, of what North Dakota State does. And I think some K-State fans were a little bit, I don't want to know if I want to say concerned, but I think a lot of them wanted him to keep Charlie Dickey. Charlie Dickey has a great history of developing offensive linemen. I mean, B.J. Finney, a walk-on guy, now is, I believe he might be starting for the Steelers, or he gets a lot of playing time, one of the two, and he's obviously one of the success stories. But Connor Riley has his fair share of success too, and he's going to come in here with 3 returning starters, 4 if you count Josh Rivas, who got a lot of playing time in there and really saw the field, and obviously loses Dalton Reisner. But Connor Riley is, would you say, is it fair to say that he is potentially one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, whether FBS or FCS?
Connor Riley is one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, full stop. Been with the program for a long time, was the tight ends and fullbacks coach under Coach Bohl, so was part of the run game concept, and then immediately was moved to the offensive line when Bohl left and brought his offensive line coach with him. Was promoted at the beginning of this season to run game coordinator, just because Kleiman had that much respect for him and wanted to continue to elevate him in any way that he could. He's that level of an offensive coach. Joe Hagg is a guy that played under him. He's with the Indianapolis Colts now. I think Dylan Radens, NDSU sophomore, left tackle, if nothing weird happens, is likely going to be an NFL-level guy. He's coached this year's Remington Award winner for the FCS, the top center in the country, Tanner Wilson. I think Tanner is a kid I've interviewed yesterday who told me, he said, man, if you would have seen me coming in here as a freshman from 9-man football in North Dakota, you would have never guessed that I would have even made the lineup, much less gotten to where I am. And it was very clear that he was crediting, Connor with that. But they've been able to move guys around without, much of a hiccup. For example, Colin Connor is a senior left guard. They had to move him inside the left guard because Radens is so darn talented. They just couldn't keep him off the field at left tackle. The kid's playing at an all-conference level, and it's the same way, up and down the line. Luke Bacon finally just this year got to play one spot. He's played every spot that isn't center on the line, and it just never changes. They just keep jamming the ball down your throat and jamming the ball down your throat. But they do a good enough job in pass protection as well. He just is an excellent developer of talent. Got Landon Leckler, another 9-man football kid from North Dakota, to the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I don't think he's still with the club, but I mean that was another.
He made it
right. Exactly, and he just keeps developing these big farm kids. And as I understand it, there are farm kids in Kansas, right?
I think there's a couple.
Yeah,
of them.
So that's a position where it's a beautiful thing as far as recruiting is concerned, because that was the same way with North Dakota State. I don't care that they can't compete with whoever to get whatever offensive lineman. There are plenty of them around, and I would guess that there are plenty of them in the Kansas area, Kansas City, whatever. They're going to be able to recruit kids at that position that Riley can develop, whether it's maybe not the 4-star left tackle from whatever high school in Oklahoma isn't going to matter. Dalton Reisner is a perfect example of that.
He sounds exactly like Bacon in that regard, interchanging among the line,
Yep.
Except, Dalton obviously did get to play the center position a little bit. But
right.
Dalton was very interchangeable at K-State, and that sounds like exactly what Colin Riley's able to coach in North Dakota State.
Oh, for sure. He'll get kids ready to play, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 positions. Everybody needs to be ready to be the next man up on that line, and they understand that. NDSU, frankly, they use a 6-man line. They don't literally have 6 offensive linemen on the field, though I think that is probably a package that they could feature. But Tanner Volson's brother, Cordell, is the next great. If you talk to any of the staff, watch out for Cordell. It's coming. Now, it's interesting because he's got this 6'7" basketball player frame, and they've got a junior all-conference right tackle, and like I said, a sophomore NFL-level left tackle. So this kid is going to have to play interior offensive line even though he's 6'7", which is kind of wild. But this kid will come in and give them 30 snaps a game, and you'll never really notice who they're giving a blow to, because he'll come in and play a couple left guard snaps. Okay, now he's out right guard snaps, right tackle snaps, and they just keep guys fresh using this 6-man offensive line. Last year it was a 7-man offensive line, and they just keep turning them out, and that's something that you might be able to pay attention to at Kansas State is you might not play the same 5 offensive linemen for 70 snaps anymore because they're going to try and develop that depth, and they're going to try and make sure that if, somebody is a little nicked, boom, somebody else can go right in there.
That's good, and I think that's going to – I think the depth K-State has at the offensive line position is really going to maybe excite some fans when they hear that, maybe get to see some new faces in there, not the same 5-6 guys all season. Let's wrap this up here with Joe Klanderman coming in in the secondary, and I think the biggest thing I took away from talking to North Dakota State players yesterday is that Joe Klanderman is a guy that is going to coach you in terms of knowing smart plays. They're not going out there, they're not jumping every single route they can in hopes of getting a pick 6. However, they're going to say, go out there and if you see something, you jump it. Get out there and try to make a play if you think you can do it, which is something K-State's not been able to do recently over the past few years. Now, this past season with Brian Norwood on the staff, they were a little bit more aggressive, but in the past they've been playing this 10, almost 15-yard cushion on receivers. We'll give you 5-6 yards as long as you don't beat us deep, and it didn't exactly have fans excited. Is that fair to say that he's going to have that same style of coaching, allow his players to be aggressive when they feel right, but also play smart at the same time and not get beat all the time?
See, this is an interesting question for a number of reasons. The number one reason is I don't know what they're going to do defensively, and it's a weird spot for me to be in.
And without all the North Dakota State staff is different.
Because the Monachino hire blew me away.
As it did everybody.
I didn't understand it. I finally got a little bit of an insider tip to go look at the 1999 Missouri State Bears coaching staff, where you can find both Chris Kleiman and Ted Monachino. But that's it, man. Like, he's been in the NFL, with the exception of this year as a defensive analyst for Mizzou. He's been in the NFL almost his entire career, playing a ton of single high, playing a ton of 3-man front, base defense. None of that is NDSU. Frankly, none of that was even Seiler's defense at Kansas State. You mentioned they played a split safety look. Most of it was cover 2, a lot of zone with a cushion, which is how that defense works. And the same thing got run at North Dakota State. I don't know if Ted Monachino knows how to run that. I don't know if Chris Kleiman hired Monachino to run his system or if he hired Monachino to run Monachino's system. So a lot of that is going to depend. That is going to make up what Klanderman does. He's going to obviously coach whatever system his head coach and his coordinator tells him to do. Now, the fundamental stuff will all stay the same, and the teaching, the proper drops and the proper, passing off from zones and this and that. But as far as press man, Kleiman, no. And as a guy who covers Green Bay too, our fans were constantly, well, we've got to stop giving these guys so much cushion and got to get in their face, and that wasn't the defensive coordinator that Green Bay hired either. But if they run the cover 2 system that Clanderman and Kleiman have had so much success with at NDSU, you won't see the press coverage that you're apparently looking for either. But if it's cover 1 with Monachino and it's a bunch of guys kind of hanging out around the line of scrimmage, maybe blitzing, maybe not, yeah, you could see that style, that in-your-face style that fans like,
right?
Because it's really easy to see a cornerback playing 8.5 yards off. They run a 4-yard route in front of them, and it's uncontested, and it looks easy, and it looks like, well, that was a stupid defensive play call. Now, within the scheme of what they're actually trying to do defensively, maybe it wasn't, and a good DB's coach could kind of explain that all away to the fans, but are never going to take the time to do so. The point that I'm trying to make is, I don't know, because the systems are so different. The Monachino ran, and then what Seiler ran, frankly, because there are a ton of similarities in what Seiler ran and what Kleiman / Clanderman ran. There are a lot of similarities. NDSU just did it a little bit better, frankly. But with this new crew, who knows? And if they're going to play that, number one thing, if they're going to play the Monachino system, the real true Monachino system, you have to have a really good free safety. He has to be awesome. He's got to be able to play center field, got to be able to get from sideline to sideline, because it's a fun system. Seattle Seahawks ran it forever. Seattle Seahawks had Earl Thomas. And I'm not saying you have to go out and recruit Earl Thomas, but the kid has to be able to play.
Right. Yeah, there's some safety depth at K-State, so we'll see how they implement that. And then, as Ross said, you gotta kind of mix all the new defensive coaches. I think the defensive side of the football is going to be really interesting.
Spring ball will be interesting just to see, kind of how they line up and what the basic coverages look like, because as much success as NDSU has had defensively, they're in their base stuff way more than you would ever expect.
Yeah, that's a quick look here at the 4 coaches that Chris Kleiman has hired, and then himself as a head coach. We're down here in Frisco, as I said earlier, and we're a few hours away from heading off to the pregame Friday press conferences with Chris Kleiman and with Eastern Washington. So we'll have some more coverage at GoPowerCat.com today. We'll be at the national championship game tomorrow in full attendance. We'll see what we can provide you at GoPowerCat.com for our valued VIP members over there. And we're having a lot of fun down here. It's fun to experience some different football, some different looks at it. I mean, I was telling Ross here kind of before we started taping that there was a tailgate party going on in our hotel lobby last night. This is a different fan base, and if you're a K-State fan, I think it'd be pretty interesting to come down here one of these years, assuming that this North Dakota State dominance stays relevant here when Chris Kleiman leaves. We'll see kind of how that progresses. So that'll do it for us here today. Riley Gates, Zach Carlson, D. Scott Fritchen, and Ross Uglum here in Frisco, bringing you tons of coverage thanks to our sponsors, The Fridge, Tanner's, Wahoo, and the Hilo. We will talk to you guys another time.
You've been listening to the PowerCat Podcast, presented by Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Now advance to being an awesome K-State fan. The PowerCat Podcast. All rights reserved. GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street Publishing.